shake, crossover, step back, and deposit.
Are you serious? Wow, can't believe it.
Gives it to Jenkins for the championship. Yeah, send it in, Jerome.
Hello and welcome back into Finding Nylon, episode 8, special episode for the pod, our second guest on the show. Great interview with Ben Haller later on in the episode. But first, guys, as we stand right now, it is Thursday, January 26th, getting closer to February, and that in turn means we're getting closer to March as well. So we got a lot to talk about today. Actually, I say a lot, but really just got to go over the top 25, and then we're going to do a short State of the Union, but we're going to give the majority of the episode to the interview with Ben because it was a lot of fun. Got to talk Xavier hoops. He's a Xavier diehard. Also Indiana hoops as well. That's where he goes to school. Talked about possible Final Four. It was a lot of fun. Me and Matt were on that interview, and overall it was just a good time. But guys, we'll start with the new AP poll. Top 25. I say new, it's new to this episode, but starting off, Purdue still at 1. No surprise there. They move up after Houston picked up that loss, and now they drop a couple spots to 3. But Alabama at 2, that's another team that they just kind of snuck away with a loss the other day. But 1, 2, 3, it feels right. Carson, do you got anything on Houston? Obviously, Cincinnati, we'll get to them later. They are playing Houston, but Houston finally loses an AAC game, and it was not their best showing.
First, Ray, I wanted to say something. If Mississippi State won at Alabama, what are your thoughts on Mississippi State be right now?
I mean, even blind squirrel find a nut every once in a while. So, I mean, it's harder to be consistently bad than it is to occasionally pick up a win. I mean, are we saying DePaul's a top 25 team because they beat
Good
Xavier
point.
at home?
That's a great point.
So, no.
For Houston, I don't know. I mean, they've kind of been on thin ice here for the last week. I mean, other than the Tulane game where they kind of blew them out, they obviously lost to Temple. They snuck past South Florida a couple weeks ago. They were hanging around with UCF last night for a while. I mean, UCF's not a pushover by any means, but I mean, you just kind of expect a top 3 team to blow everyone out, which I think is the problem. I think when we say Alabama snuck past Mississippi State, it's easy to look at that, but it's also well, they were down by a good amount and fought the way back and won. So it's I think that's more so proving that you're a top 5 team than maybe blowing out a bad team, if that makes sense. Your ability to overcome a deficit. I think that's why Xavier continues to I know last night they didn't they weren't in a big hole, but they were up by a lot, fought off a huge run from UConn at home in a sold out arena and still won.
Yeah.
I think your ability to fend off a big push by a really good team is way more impressive in my eyes than just blowing someone out. Cause every team has bad games. So teams are going to blow teams out every now and again. It just happens. It's college basketball. But I think your ability to either overcome a huge deficit or maintain a lead against a really good team is very impressive in my eyes.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of a double-edged sword in the sense that on one hand, you expect the really top teams to blow everyone out, but you also want those teams to be able to win close games. But on the other hand, in Xavier's case, hey, let's not keep every game
right
incredibly close like they have done this year. I mean, if you go up and tally their point differential, it's really not that much for a team that has won as much as they have, just because they have been the kings of winning 2-3 possession games, if not a 1 possession game like they did last night against UConn. But like you said, Carson, you expect that team like Houston to blow everyone out. That's not the case. They lose a tough one against Temple, and Temple, like we saw earlier in the year against UC, they're a team that can beat anyone. They just kind of hang around. If you're Houston, obviously you want to have that one back in the worst way, but that things happen in conference play. So that's our top 3. Then at 4, we see Tennessee all the way back to that spot. They've got Texas over the weekend in that SEC Big 12 Challenge, which is going to be very interesting. We will talk about that a little more going forward. But what do you guys think about Tennessee after sustaining that home loss to Kentucky all the way back up to number 4 this week? Is this something that just they keep winning so the AP poll rewards them, or do you guys think that they should have stayed lower this week?
I think Tennessee's a great basketball team. I would like to I love to compare things to Xavier, but I would like to compare their loss to Kentucky, Xavier's loss to Paul. So I think Xavier proved last night that the loss to Paul was kind of a fluke game. It's a bad game. It's going to happen. And I kind of look at the Kentucky loss to Tennessee the same way, because right now I think Bama's at first place right now, but Tennessee is still my favorite to win SEC.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, no, I mean, it's that is a very much a similar situation. Like, you lose a tough game.
To add on to Tennessee, not to cut you off, but I mean, like, they keep beating outside of Kentucky. It's like we keep putting asterisks by it, but outside of Kentucky, like they're beating everyone they should. Like, they're blowing teams out.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, they beat LSU on the road by over 20. They beat Georgia last night by like 40. They beat Vanderbilt, who's been kind of a giant slayer this year. They beat South Carolina by 40, Mississippi State by 20. Like, they're blowing teams out. So I think they're easily a top 5 team. I wanted to also say something about Purdue. This might be a hot take. I don't know how other people feel about Purdue, but I'm so ready for that team to lose like more games than they should, like than they have. Like, if you've watched Purdue, like, they could easily have, I know this is like a stupid hypothetical. I'm not a hypotheticals guy. They could easily have 4 or 5 losses, if not more. If you watch the Michigan State game, they could have absolutely lost that game. They snuck past Nebraska on the road. They won by like 2 or 3 points. They snuck past OSU. So they've snuck past numerous teams. They beat Maryland at home by like 3 points. So that was another close game. Like, there's 4 or 5 games right now on their in the past that could have easily been losses. And I know that's like stupid because they won the game, but like, I think tonight they play Michigan tonight. I think I'm ready for them to lose, because I think this is a game that obviously Hunter Dickinson, there's no way to completely X out a 7'7" center in Zach Edey, who's the player of the year. You're never going to have you're never going to have a player on your own team that can cancel that out. But at the same time, I think they have a player that can kind of like maybe limit him at least to an extent. Hunter Dickinson's like 7 foot. I think he could pose a challenge. So like, I think Alabama is the number 1 team in basketball right now, if I had to pick. Like, I know they're not, but I think I'm just ready for Purdue to lose a few of these games that they could have lost, like here in the latter stretch of the Big Ten season.
Yeah, I agree. I think Purdue's just benefiting a lot from like a very, very weak Big Ten this year.
I agree.
I think if you put Purdue in like Big 12 or SEC, I think you'd have like maybe 3 or 4 losses right now, because they're winning, like you said. You said earlier, like, they're winning games, but they're barely beating teams, and they're beating barely mediocre teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Did you guys see Jordan Bohannon on that podcast with Hunter Dickinson? Just absolutely decimating him, saying how Zach Edey's going to put up 30 and 20 on him tonight, and like that, like his basketball career is going to be over.
I think you're just messing with them to motivate them. Like, I think
it was the funniest thing. And Hunter Dickinson's like, it can happen, but like,
I just think I'm ready for Purdue to lose. Like, I'm not going to call them frauds. They're not frauds. I'm just like, I don't know if they're I don't think they're the number 1 team in college basketball. I'm sorry, but like, I like right now, like I just give the edge to Alabama if I had to pick, and maybe even Tennessee. Like, Tennessee's we'll keep seeing how good these teams are in like these tough conferences like the SEC, but I just don't think Purdue is the number 1 team in college basketball.
Yeah, and to go off Cole's point, for a guy that's been as hot-headed on the court as Hunter Dickinson has been in past years, he's an incredibly calm person off the court. Like, just sits there and takes it on that podcast. Like, it's
dumb stuff on Michigan State, but
yeah,
I mean, I'm biased there.
It's interesting, but yeah, I think you're right. Moving on to 5, Kansas State. They couldn't get it done last night. They're looking forward towards Florida. Carson, we know you're big on Jerome Tang. Are you worried about that loss against Iowa State for Kansas State?
No, I mean, Iowa State's been a pest. Like, people call that an upset. Like, it's their top, like, what are they, 12?
12.
So, like, I mean, like, it's an upset because of AP poll, but like in reality, like that's just kind of an even match when you put Iowa State on their home floor. So like I don't know, but it's going to be an interesting transition. I say that's because Kansas State's kind of moving from like the hunter to being the hunted.
Yeah.
Because early in the year, no one expected them to be good. They were kind of playing with like a nothing to lose mentality. And now they're a top 5 basketball team now. So like you're quickly becoming like the biggest game on a team schedule. And so you now have the target on your back. So I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic to see unfold. I think they're a very good, like they're a very, very good basketball team. I love Jerome Tang. I think he has to be the favorite for coach of the year right now, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how they fare now that they're like maybe the top target in the Big 12, slightly behind Kansas.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that's always a tough dynamic to kind of come over, because it's a similar situation to the Bengals right now. Obviously, that's getting out there, but for so long the Bengals have been the underdog, and now all of a sudden going into this week for the AFC Championship, they were favored at one point, and kind of everyone's expecting them to win. So yeah, that's Jerome Tang is going to have his work cut out for him, just getting his guys to adapt to that new mindset that now you have something to lose and you've got to defend it. But turning towards Arizona at number 6, they're going on the road against Washington State on their next game. That'll be tomorrow night. Obviously, Arizona is a team that's been up and down, but they've won enough games to get back to 6. Virginia in the ACC, they are quietly just kind of winning games left and right, and they moved up to 7 in the country. They're taking on Boston College on Saturday. That feels like a game that's not really going to be close. Virginia is just a team that can really keep winning games. They're going to keep moving up the poll, and I'd have to say they're the favorite to take in the AAC or the ACC, excuse me. Are they not, guys?
I think they have to be. I mean, they're kind of running away from everyone. Duke is not looking like, I mean, they're still a tournament team probably, but I mean, they don't look very good. I mean, for as much talent as they have right now, they definitely aren't really impressing anybody. And then UNC's kind of been up and down like all year. So other than maybe like Miami, or unless I'm forgetting anybody, like I think like they're easily the favorite for the ACC. That could be.
ACC is a really weak conference this year.
Yeah.
I mean,
That
they
could
should,
be
they should easily win that.
Yeah.
I mean, the main competitors are Miami and Clemson, right? Clemson.
Yeah, Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, that's theirs to take it.
Yeah, there's a chance that the ACC, excuse me, gets 2, maybe 3 bids this year. Honestly, I mean, and they're going to benefit, and they always do, off the name on the front of the jersey. But to be completely honest, I just don't think that's going to be enough this year for some of these teams. But after Virginia, you go to 8 with UCLA. They've dropped 3 spots after a loss. They're going at USC tonight. That's going to be a good game, kind of a get-back game for UCLA. If they lose that one, then it might be time to hit the panic button if you're Mick Cronin's squad. But the interesting team, down to number 9 from number 2, Kansas. They've lost 3 in a row, albeit they have played really good opponents, including Baylor, K-State, and they lost a tough one at home. But are you guys hitting the panic button if you're Bill Self right now? Because 3 straight is just not something that the Kansas Jayhawks are used to.
I'd say no. I think, like you said, like 3 really tough teams in a row. I mean, at Baylor, at Kansas State, like just brutal games. I wouldn't consider that, because like you said, or like we've talked about in the past, like you can get your losses back pretty quickly. But I think maybe the biggest losers out of this like bad run by Kansas is Kentucky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if Kansas just kept winning and coasted into Kentucky, I would have probably picked Kentucky. But now you have a pissed off Bill Self and obviously like still an amazing Kansas team. So like I went from maybe like honestly probably thinking Kentucky was going to win that game this weekend, but now it's like almost like a gotta have it win for Kansas.
Yeah.
It's absolutely got to have it win. Like they lose that game, Are they even looking at a 2 seed at this point? Because you can't go
No.
through a 4-game losing streak. So
Yeah.
then they got
Not a
Kansas
thing.
State at home, at Iowa State, Texas at home. I mean, that's a gauntlet of a schedule. So they got to win against Kentucky.
Yeah. That's definitely a gotta have it game now for Bill Self and his squad. At number 10 is Texas, and then following it up with two more Big 12 teams and TCU and Iowa State. Those guys, Texas is taking on at Tennessee. That's going to be a phenomenal game in Rocky Top. TCU at Mississippi State. That should be just an absolute shit show for TCU to win. And then Iowa State at Missouri. So that's going to be some fun games in the Big 12 SEC Challenge. I'll ask you guys now, what game are you most excited for out of that slate? Because obviously it's a good one. You got some teams that match up interestingly, like obviously Florida, Kansas State, but then you have Tennessee versus Texas. What are you guys most excited for?
I'll start. I'm really excited for that Tennessee Texas game because both of those teams are doing great. I mean, we talked about Tennessee's had that one bad loss, but they've been blowing out teams in SEC since then. So I'm really, really looking forward to that game because it's a big, whoever wins that game is looking at a definite 2 seed, maybe 1 seed. So both of those teams got to have that game if they're trying to get a 1 seed. So they're both going to be playing their asses off.
Yeah. Carson, what do you got?
I'm torn kind of between Kansas, Kentucky, and then who does Texas plays Tennessee, correct?
Yeah.
So I think both those games will be incredible, obviously, but like more I've thought about it, Kentucky kind of needs that game too. So it's like I don't know. Like I was kind of focused on Kansas there, but like both those teams could really, really use that game as like a booster. But I'm also kind of interested to see Florida plays Kansas State, and obviously Keontae Johnson was at Florida. I'm interested to see like that. That'll be kind of an interesting storyline to follow. So I think these are there's 4 or 5 really, really good games in this slate. So like great matchups. Whoever coordinated this did like a great job. Some of them were layups. Like Kansas and Kentucky was kind of like a must. Like you got to do 2 blue bloods, but I think they matched up a lot of the other teams really well.
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead, Cole.
Those are like mine too. But if I had to pick like another one, I would say the Arkansas Baylor game.
Yeah,
that's no one's gonna talk about that one as much, and it's like it's a good opportunity for Arkansas to like kind of get back on track. Not that they won their last, I think, 2, but and they're unranked last week and then obviously this week. And so I think that if they can beat Baylor, kind of like get their name back out there, and they're going to make the tournament, but increase their seed. So pick another game that wasn't.
I was gonna say both those teams are kind of underachieving, and that game kind of that's exciting for me because two underachieving teams, both those fan bases really want to win that game, so it's gonna be really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And then my game is another one, and we keep just throwing these games out there, but I'm excited for Auburn at West Virginia because I think West Virginia is a team that's got a chip on their shoulder. They haven't had the success in Big 12 play that they wanted. Auburn is kind of a team that I feel like gets forgotten in the haze that was the SEC. You kind of talked about, you saw Alabama, obviously a front runner. You talk about Kentucky year in and year out. We were talking about Arkansas a lot, and I think Auburn just kind of got lost in the shuffle. And I think that's a team that's hungry to kind of put their name back out there as, hey, we're a team that has won some games in March, and we should be respected like that. So that's the game that I'm excited for. But that does it until the 12th. Then we get to 13 with Xavier. They pick up a big win at UConn. And Matt, we're going to we're going to talk about them in a little bit, but it feels like you said earlier, that win solidifies that DePaul game was absolutely a fluke. It's not something that fans and observers have to worry about going forward. It's just when your defense is as bad as Xavier's is, you're going to have close games, and occasionally shots just aren't going to fall that well for you.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. I think that game just proved that if they're not making the shots, if they're not putting up 80 points a game, then their defense is going to kill them. They're going to lose some games. So I think that game is really a wake-up call for their defense. You can't say they played great defense against UConn, but I thought they played pretty well down the stretch, even though they got outscored by a lot in the second half. But yeah, I mean, honestly, looking back, this is a really optimistic take, but maybe we'll look back at the Paul game and say it was for the best. Who knows?
Yeah.
That's what I've been seeing a lot from, or like hearing a lot from Xavier fans too. Like they needed one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it definitely could have been a wake up call because I mean you kind of get in that notion and don't get it twisted. Xavier had just about as advantageous of a Big East schedule to start as you could have had with the right games being at home, the right games being on the road. And then you pick up a lot of wins and you kind of get lost in that shuffle of like, hey, we're the big dogs. They got to play us. And so that game could be a really good wake up call for the Muskies with that one. But at 14, now this is interesting. This is where some guys are probably going to raise some eyebrows at the AP poll. At 14, right under Xavier is Gonzaga. Now, why is that weird? Obviously, if you think back all the way to the PK Invitational out in Oregon, Gonzaga beat Xavier. So obviously it's the AP poll. Gonzaga loses a West Coast game that they had no business losing, but it still does kind of make you shake your head, especially if you're a Gonzaga fan, because you're ranked below a team that you already beat, even after a loss.
I think the loss at home to Loyola Marymount was like, I think we've already seen examples of it, but like this just isn't like, I'm not gonna say it's like not like a normal Gonzaga team, but like this just isn't like the cream of the crop Gonzaga teams that we've seen in the past. Like this team's vulnerable in spots, and I think when you rely on players as much as you do with like Timmy and Strother, and some of the like nights those guys don't show up, like you're gonna lose. So
yeah,
it's unfortunate for them, but like when you're in that conference, like losing more than one or two games is like kind of like confusing, kind of a head scratching thing, because that conference just isn't good. I mean, you get beyond like St. Mary's and Loyola Marymount's not bad, but I mean, it's hard to tell how good those teams are once they get into conference play, because the lower teams just beat up on each other, and then it's just Gonzaga. It's Gonzaga and everyone else usually.
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting now because St. Mary's is in the AP poll as well. We'll get to them in a second, but they're kind of knocking on the door. So I don't know. I mean, do you think there's any chance that St. Mary's wins this conference?
I think there definitely is. I think that's the thing that I think people don't realize is like St. Mary's has been right there with Gonzaga for years. And you get lost in the kind of notion that this is Gonzaga's conference to lose. They're in a conference they shouldn't be in. And that mumbo jumbo is true. But at the end of the day, St. Mary's has beaten Gonzaga. They've been there kind of really looking right over their shoulder for a while. So it's kind of one of those things where I think this is definitely a year that St. Mary's could finally pull it off, but don't get it twisted. This is a St. Mary's team that this is not uncharted territory for them.
I'm looking at St. Mary's schedule right now, and like their front half of their West Coast Conference. I mean, not disrespecting, but it's already, you're not playing the best of teams, but there's top of the best teams in the West Coast come at the end of the schedule for them. And they got some tough road games coming up, so I'm definitely gonna say it's Gonzaga's conference, but it's an interesting question for sure.
Yeah. Yep. But then at 15, we've got Auburn. We talked about them. They're kind of looking to prove themselves and solidify it at West Virginia. 16, Marquette. They move up 4 spots. They're at DePaul on Saturday. That'll be a nice Big East tilt. Obviously, a game that Marquette should win, but you never know. DePaul at home can always be chaos. Number 17, Baylor. We talked about them. They're against Arkansas, kind of an underachieving team, like Matt put it. Obviously, Coach Drew's going to get his team ready for March, but it feels like a team that coming into the year should have been better in conference play to this point. They've won some games, but I think they have definitely underachieved than what they were looking for. But that's Baylor at 17. Now, Carson, I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Number 18, Pat Kelsey's group with Charleston. I'm not going to say how I stand on it, but I'm going to let you have the floor with Charleston.
All right, listen, I'm going to preface everything I'm about to say with, I think Charleston is a very good basketball team, but they're in the Colonial Conference.
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Power 6.
When I say Colonial Conference, like I think everyone knows where I'm going with this. Like
Power six.
you're 21-1, but like I mean, brutal game coming up against Hofstra. I mean, like all right, like here's what I'm gonna say. Like once again, they're a very good basketball team. Okay, so I'm not gonna sit here and say like this team is undeserving of being in the AP poll or anything like that. But this is a team that has maybe first, second round exit written all over it.
Yeah.
Tournament. I'm sorry, but if this team makes a run, I'll gladly eat my words, but I'll wait and see. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wait and see how good they are in the tournament. I mean, they don't play anyone, so we're going to have to see how good they are once we get to March.
I pose a question. What happens if they meet Kentucky in the tournament?
I mean, if Kentucky beat them, that's
awesome. Yeah,
that's an upset for Kentucky beating them. I mean, Charleston's ranked, Kentucky's not.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say this. So
if they played right now,
I'm just messing with you, but I mean, I would love to watch that happen. I would love to watch that happen.
I kind of want to respond to Carson here. Like you said, like we're gonna have to wait to see how good they are. Like they did their best with scheduling non-conference games. They played at North Carolina, and they stayed in it for a little bit, but they ended up getting crushed. Score says that, but they stayed in the game. They beat Richmond at home. They beat Davidson at home. And again, there's no Power 5 teams, but those are high, like mid-majors. Then they also beat Virginia Tech at home. So they beat Colorado State at home, Davidson at home. Like they tried their best scheduling. And I mean, they're beating teams by a big margin. Besides that UNCW game, who people are saying is a really great team, they're beating teams pretty handily. I feel like they deserve like this high of a ranking, in my opinion.
I think they absolutely should be in the AP poll. Like they're 21-1. They're beating the teams that they should beat. But I just it's really hard for me to sit here and say like this is a Elite 8 squad. This is a Sweet 16 squad because I think they run into it. They're gonna run into a buzzsaw, a Big 12 team that maybe got seeded a little too low, and we'll find out the hard way about how good this team really is. So They run into a Baylor. They run into Baylor. What's the score of that game right now? Yeah. What's this I don't think anyone's taking Charleston in that game, unless maybe Zach. Zach likes to be a little different sometimes. But I think if we were sitting here, Baylor against Charleston, neutral site, who are we taking here in that game? I think it's unanimous. I think we would all think Scott Drew is probably coming out on top of that game.
Yeah. For sure.
I also want to say, Zach, I just think it's really have you guys do you follow Pat Kelsey's Twitter at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
The videos he posts are hilarious.
Yeah, and I'm looking at their ticket price for the game this weekend. It's $90. $90 to get into TD Arena.
Jesus.
That's just it's crazy. It's
Power 6.
And I know
once again, I wanted to emphasize I'm not sitting here dumping on them saying they stink, right? It's awesome seeing an underdog win. I hope they go far, but it's also how good really is this team, because it's hard to tell in this conference, but I do hope they do well at the same time, and I'll gladly eat my words if they make a deep run or something, but right now it's just hard to say that this team has a deep run in them.
Yeah. I was more so just as a Xavier fan, for that guy's name, he always wanted the Xavier job, and to see him doing what he did at Winthrop, now doing it Charleston, and just knowing that we have Sean Miller, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, but it kind of does, because I love his Twitter videos and I love what he's doing at Charleston. So it's it just kind of sucks to know that we can't fall back on him anymore, because he's going to go to a Power 5 school for sure after what he's doing at Charleston.
He's an outer guy too, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a West Sider.
Cincinnati guy. He's just he was my dream coach when during the Travis years. Once I get up on Travis, he's my dream guy. So yeah.
I don't know. I go back and forth. Obviously, no one's arguing against Sean Miller, but he seems like an excellent mid-major coach, and that's kind of the ceiling, I feel like. So that's my but we've talked about Charleston enough. At 19 is UConn. They lose a game against Xavier. The wheels are starting to fall off. They're really going to have to figure it out coming up soon. Number 20 is Miami. That's another team we talked about. They're always in the mix with the ACC, but obviously this is just a weak conference this year. 21, Florida Atlantic, kind of in the same shoes as Charleston. They're 19-1. Actually, I think they're 20-1 now, but they haven't really played much of anything. St. Mary's at 22. We mentioned they're going to be in the mix, and the West Coast. Providence at 23. They're hanging around. They finally beat the brakes off of Butler after a game that they started super slow, but they end up with a 20-point victory. That was much needed. For the Friars at 24 is Clemson. They dropped 5 spots. I think Clemson was kind of the beneficiary of a easy schedule to get into ACC play. They went on a run. Everyone's, oh, look at Clemson, look at Clemson. They're still Clemson basketball. They're just incredibly mid for a Power 5. I mean, they'll get ranked. I think they're a second round at best team, probably get bounced first round. I don't see it with the Tigers. And then New Mexico comes back into the top 25 at 18-2.
I want to shout out Maction. Kent State's knocking on the door. They're at 30.
Yeah. Kent State's solid. No, I mean, as a guy that's called a bunch of MAC games this year, or not MAC games, but games for a MAC school, Kent State is absolutely legit. They're gonna ruin somebody's season in March.
You know who Kent State lost to? Not to get
Who's
toxic.
that?
Charleston.
Did they?
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, that's MAC though. They're good, but
It was a close
They're
game.
not
It was a really close
consistent.
game. They lost to
yeah,
they lost at Charleston.
yeah.
yeah. I mean, Miami's on their way up to the top 25 as well. So.
Ooh, no. I tell you what, Charleston wouldn't come here into Millette Hall and knock anyone off, though. They wouldn't win.
For sure.
Travis Steele, look out.
Yeah.
Sure. Get those
Don't
dogs
worry.
barking.
Don't worry about the Red Hawks. We got it covered. All right.
We're tanking.
That does it for our top 25 discussion. Now on the State of the Union. Cole, all-time collapse for Dayton. The floor is yours. I'll give you 3 minutes here.
Yeah, I think you guys all know where this is headed. So yeah, Anthony Grant, the luxury of college basketball is you're given 4 timeouts a half or over the course of a game. They were down for a lot of the first half, didn't use a single timeout. Back-to-back games, their guards have given up 58 and 60 points to the other team's guards. Seems pretty good, unless little off my rocker. But yeah, Anthony Grant, he's on the hot seat. Not like actually, but like dude can recruit. His in-game coaching is just you sit there and like
see Travis Steele.
I just want to start pulling my hair out.
Ooh.
Yeah. Are we getting a Travis Steele comp here?
No.
Why not?
What you just described is Travis.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna say.
This is the same thing. Travis Steele gets the recruits in the
Okay.
building, and then he'll let guys like Zach Fremantle get 4 fouls at one half, doesn't make the substitutions, doesn't call the right time.
No, okay. I'm going to go back to the stakes. So when Malachi Smith and Kobe Ellis were out, they struggled a little bit, like at first to play, with Mongolian Mike, like playing hard for the first time ever. He, took a learning curve. But then after 3 games, they were on a roll and they were playing really well. That's when people were like, okay, they're legit. Like they should go undefeated in this conference. I said this on Nylon, I think a couple weeks ago. A little bit of a hot take. This team might play better without those two, and it's starting to become true because they start trying to run the offense through Kobe Ellis again, and it's seemingly coming back to bite them in the butt. So
I could have told you this was going to happen when you guys hired John Brannon. I mean, you guys hired the worst coach in college basketball history, and it's no coincidence. Tell me it's coincidence that you hired that dork. Yeah. And they start suddenly just go down the drain.
Yeah,
not to kick a guy when he's down because he's had a brutal face.
To be fair, he provides enough the worth to that team. He doesn't even get to sit on the bench. He has to sit behind the bench.
Oh
Good.
no!
That's where he belongs. That's where he should.
No!
Yeah, so he literally does nothing. During the timeouts, it's awesome just watching him. He just sits back there and stares around. It's like, all right, what are you doing?
That guy started a walk-on. He started a walk-on over Tari Eason, who was a first-round draft pick for the Houston Rockets. So if anyone thinks, wow, this guy's being hard on John Brandt, that's why. He drove UC into the ground, and he started a walk-on over Tari's, and that is why I'm fired up about this guy.
I can't disagree with you, but yeah, Flyers only hopes to win the A10 tournament, so they got about a month to figure it out, and then if not, it wraps.
Yep. All right, Carson, what do you got for UC? They're taking on Houston. That was a game that maybe could have been won going forward, but Houston with that Temple loss, it feels like an ass kicking is brewing.
Yeah, so I'll keep it quick. If you want to watch like a summary of UC season, watch the South Florida game and then watch the Memphis game. Literally the definition of Jekyll and Hyde. Like South Florida, they looked like one of the best offensive teams in the country, put up 85, and that's with them taking their foot off the gas in the second half because they were up like 20 like the whole game. Then Memphis at home, they come out flat. It kind of stunk because huge snowstorm, Bengals were playing, so like it was kind of a perfect like storm for them to not play well, which like sounds stupid, but like you kind of had some things stacked against you in terms of developing a home court. So it kind of stinks, but I hope they put up a fight against Houston, a team that's kind of been on thin ice a little bit the last few games. But like you said, going to Houston's a gauntlet, so I'm expecting another loss. But this season's kind of gone. It's been up and down like all year, so anything could happen with this team if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Matt, Muskies on the road. Creighton always wears the pink uniforms against us. Are the Muskies getting it done in Omaha on Saturday?
Kind of put me on the spot there, but I want to say yes. I mean, they looked awesome the first half last night. They did not look great in the second half last night. I mean, when you're up 15 points, you should win a game like in the second half. Like people like to say how like, I mean, I guess I kind of hypocritical because I did say like we closed the game out, but that was more just probably one at UConn. But when you're on 15 points, like you should win the game. But anyway, that doesn't really have to do anything. But I think they will win at Omaha because this Creighton team, if you watch them, they're really not that great at all.
Yeah.
They're beating all their wins are against teams they should be beating.
Yeah.
So like for Xavier to go in there shouldn't be any problem with losing to them, especially with the luck we've had in Omaha recently. We've beaten them the last 3 or 4 times in Omaha, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So yeah.
Yep. They've had their way against them. It's hard to bet against the Muskies right now. It just feels like they've got a chokehold on the Big East. But perfect segue. Great interview with Ben Haller. Me and Matt got to talk to him for it was all of 40 minutes, I'm pretty sure. So enjoy that, guys. Here's Ben Haller. We'll be back in just a second.
I'll show you later. There's a picture in 2015. I went to the Big East tournament with my family, and Matt Stainbrook's famous for his bow ties. So I'm in 4th grade, I believe, and I hear a lot, like I look like a mini Stainbrook. So I dress up, going to the Big East tournament with a bow tie and put some fake glasses on to try to look like my favorite player, Matt Stainbrook. Got a picture with him, and it was an awesome moment. And Stainbrook just always has been an inspiration, and that's got to be my favorite player.
Yeah, no, I love that. I remember those 2 years were just electric. Watching him in the post. Obviously not the most sexy basketball player like you see, like Soleil Boom goes out and scored 20 a night, but hey, worked in the trenches and he worked hard. I mean, that was that stretch of Xavier basketball where they had Stainbrook, Reynolds, then you get into some of the other guys that were on the team, Zach Hankins later, like these big men that were just very lovable guys that you love to watch play basketball. It was a lot of fun. Obviously, you can't talk about your favorite Xavier player without also talking about your favorite Xavier team. Is there one that sticks out in your mind? Obviously, I think everyone kind of acknowledges the best team that there was with Blewett, McCura back in the day. They got the 1 seed. Is it that team that may be your favorite, or is there another team that was just exciting to watch just kind of throughout the year?
I'll go to 2 years. So the year before the one you were talking about, 16-17, where McCura and Blewett were injured for a lot of the season. Edmund Sumner tore his ACL, was out for the year. We got an 11 seed, not the best regular season we've ever had. Ended up making the Elite 8 as an 11 seed, and that was especially special to me because I was there in Orlando for the first and second round when we played Maryland in the first round and Florida State in the second round. So that team holds a special place in my heart. And then we're talking Stainbrook, kind of the same kind of deal 2 years before, the 14-15 team where we went to the Sweet 16 when we beat Ole Miss and Georgia State, and then ended up losing to Arizona in the Sweet 16. I was in LA when we lost to Arizona, and my dad's got a picture of just tears rolling down my face when that Xavier team lost in the Sweet 16, and it was especially Stainbrook's last game. So those are got to be two of my favorite teams of all time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, there's
I wanted to say too, like, there's something about an 11 seed team that makes a run like so like more enjoyable. Like if you're like a 2 seed or a 1 seed in a tournament, getting to Elite Eight's like almost expected. So when you're an 11 seed, like it should almost feel the same, especially for a program like Xavier. It's only been the 2 or 3 Elite Eights, but man, like when you're an 11 seed make the Elite Eight, that just feels truly magical. So that's also probably my favorite team ever.
I don't know. Us as Xavier fans, we might, if we want to make the Elite Eight, we might rather be 11 seed or something like that compared to a 1 or 2 seed, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
just based on some history. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have a team this year that could potentially make a run. What do you really like about this year's team? And besides, I mean, I think the obvious answer is probably 3-point shooting and the offense, which contrasts a lot from last year. But what is your favorite thing about this year's team that makes them so special?
well, Sean Miller coming in is big for a lot of reasons, but I definitely think, I mean, there's two sides. There's the offense and the defense. Defense has definitely struggled through this year. I saw on a podcast earlier today that someone mentioned Xavier's defense is their offense. I mean, they just the way they score and how fast tempo they play. And one of the things I've really noticed about the offense is they don't take bad shots. Very rarely do they take bad shots. I mean, I was talking to my brother about years past, just like 1, 2, 3 years ago. You remember we had gotten so many situations where we had to take a tough shot at the end of the shot clock because we milked so much time off the clock. And you talk about teams who pass the ball so well, especially too, you expect a lot of those teams to kind of milk time off the clock. We go quick. I mean, it's the closest thing to an NBA style offense as you're going to get in college basketball, really, with how fast paced it is. And it's not because we're taking bad shots going fast. It's because we know how to move the ball. The ball just doesn't stop in the Xavier offense, and that's what really makes the offense so special.
Yeah, and to rebound off that too, I remember, I don't know whether it was at the camp that I helped out with this summer or during a game or something, but you hear Sean Miller, one of his things that he'll harp on is keeping the energy in the basketball, and that's what we've seen this year from the Muskies. And the one thing that I've noticed that separates Xavier is they are a great passing team, but it does not take them long to pass it. You see so many teams that'll get a great pass, but they'll hold the ball for a second and they make extra passes that they don't need. This Xavier team is incredibly efficient, and when they make a pass, it's to set up another shot or a back cut or something that's going to lead to points. And that, you're exactly right, it is that they don't get deep in the shot clock, and their defense is their offense, because you see, hey, we cannot stop them on offense. You get that little bit of extra pressure on that 3-point shot down at the other end, and you see a lot more rattle outs than we saw last year, because teams could go down the court with peace of mind saying, these guys aren't going to make a good shot. They're going to just take a cop out last second three, and then we'll get our own shot on the other end. But this year, you take it right to a team and you just keep scoring, and it wears them down. And we've seen that. Now, Ben, we've seen this team be at its best. They got up to 8 in the country. They pulled off big wins against UConn, Marquette. St. John's was a big one looking back at it now. This team suffered a blow at DePaul. What do you need to see from this team to think that they can be in that real upper echelon of college basketball going forward into March?
I mean, the defense got to get better, and everyone says that. I mean, we can sit here and talk about getting stops and everything. They're capable. I think it all starts at the point guard position. I saw a stat earlier. In 13 high major games, the 13 high major games that Xavier's played this year, opposing point guards are averaging 22.5 points a game, something like 5 rebounds, 5 assists, shooting 42% from 3. It's like Xavier's playing an All-American at point guard, night in, night out. And I mean, you can talk about the struggles that Nunji and Fremantle had defending earlier this year with guys like Trace Jackson Davis, Kyle Filipowski. But as of right now, it starts with the guards. Sule Boom, Colby Jones, Desmond Clodd, they are not defending right now. And especially with Colby Jones, he's capable. We've seen in games like the Creighton game, games earlier this year, like the West Virginia game, when Colby Jones needs to get a stop, he can get a stop. But it's just hard. It's just those 40 minutes. He's not he gets a little lazy on defense, and I don't know exactly what that fix is, but I still think there's little ways to go to get in that upper echelon like you talked about, and just especially defensively.
Yeah.
It's funny you brought that stat because I got that stat pulled up right here from a Musketeer report, and I was
Yeah,
going to bring that up. Yeah, I mean at the Paul game and especially that Georgetown game, it seems like they're just letting every single point guard we're playing. You said it best. Looks like an All-American. It's really frustrating. But as we did see in the DePaul game, I think my biggest concern is well, not concern. I guess it could be looked at as a positive is our offense is either going to win us the game or it's going to lose us the game. Defense is kind of just like this point in the season. I'm not looking at any like improvements or getting worse at defense at all. It seems like if we're going to shoot well, we're going to win the game. But in a game like the DePaul game, if we're going to miss shots, we're going to lose.
As a Xavier fan, I think that's a good. I think that's good to look at it that way because we could be better defensively. I don't think they can get much better defensively. I mean, it's just not a very good defensive team. I mean, individually, you look at the guys we have on the court, none of them are known for their defense, besides maybe Colby Jones that we talked about, who is capable. But other than that, Sule Boom, Adam Conklin, they're just not quick enough. And so if you really believe that it's the offense that's going to make or break our season, then that's something that's something positive to look at just because of how good our offense has been so far in the season. And I don't totally disagree with you.
Yeah, no, and the one thing I will say about that is the one thing that I'm noticing as an objective fan that tries to see the X's and O's while watching the game, while also loving the players we have on the floor, being excited for them, is that our guards at times, and now Colby Jones has gone through this in his career time and time again. It almost seems like they're worried about fouls more than anything early in the game, and now Colby Jones, I think, actually has a claim for that because how many times have we seen Colby Jones pick up a first foul in the first 2 minutes of the game, then picks up a iffy second one about 5 minutes left in the half, and then picks up a quick one in the second. And he's already at 3 fouls early in the second half, and you got to take him out for a little bit. But so many times this year we've seen Boom and Jones, and even at times Claude when he comes in, you get him on a little bit outside of the three-point arc, you do a high ball screen, and then they're just toast on either the pull-up jumper or they can't guard the dribble. But it does feel like, to Matt's point, that has not decided the game because in the games that they have lost, the one thing you can point to is, hey, there's missed shots there. We weren't offensively efficient in this part of the game. I mean, you look at Indiana, there was the missed shot by Kunkel at the end. Gonzaga, you blow a 6-point lead because you can't get a bucket. Nunji finally snapped out of his little rut that he had, but same with the Duke game. Nunji was a non-factor. So what do you want to see going forward on the offensive end? Because obviously this is a team that is incredibly exciting, but correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like there might just be an extra gear for this team if you can just get a couple more makes here. Because how many times have we seen opposing teams go on these huge 15, 10-point runs and we have to really grind it out with some teams? What do you want to see better on the offensive end?
Well, something I'm going to add is I remember, especially with the Indiana and Duke game, I'm not really sure about Gonzaga or DePaul, but we've shown we've been able to handle poor defense from ourselves. What hurts is when our poor defense leads to foul trouble, which hurts us offensively as well. When we stay out of foul trouble and let other teams score, I mean, we still have a chance. But we had so many guys in foul trouble against Indiana, a lot of guys in foul trouble against Duke. You talked about Nunji being a non-factor. I think not fouling is a big factor of that. And offensively, it's hard to ask for more. It's a top 5 offense in the country, leads the country in assists. I know if you've watched the Xavier game recently, you've heard the broadcasters say that about every 5 minutes. Top 5 in 3-point percentage, top 10 in field goal percentage. There's not a lot of flaws to the offense right now. I mean, if you want to look for something, I mean, you look at the DePaul game and 4 for 26 combined from the field from Colby Jones and Tule Boom. Knock on wood, that's not going to happen again.
Yeah.
So I think right now, you literally look at every single one of our problems, every one of the flaws, and it's all on the defensive end.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Matt, I think you got the next one.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about concerns, favorite things about this year, it's all going to end up somewhere. Where do you see his team finishing?
always a tough question, especially with Xavier, with the getting a worse seed and finishing further than expected, getting a higher seed, finishing not as far as expected. Right now, I'll say Elite Eight because I think it's a team that has the firepower to go on a run a little bit. It's a team with Final Four capability. I've heard people talk about national title contender or the national title contender. Right now, the defense is not good enough. You look at the worst defensive team in KenPom, you look at other metrics that have won a national championship in recent history. None of them have been nearly as bad as us. There have been worse teams defensively that have made the Final Four, though. So I think it's just March Madness is just so weird. It's one of those tournaments where it's hard to make a prediction without seeing the draw, without seeing how the rest of the season plays out. But I think it's a team that is more likely to upset somebody else than to get upset themselves. So that's why I'll say Elite Eight. I mean, right now it's probably projected, if you look at a seed and bracketology, that we would make the Sweet 16. So I'll predict an Elite Eight.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that analysis. The one thing I will say too is that I feel better about this team than I have in past years because this team has been playing March-esque games for how long now? I mean, we haven't seen just a breakaway win since that Southern game. Even Georgetown, where you have it in the bag the whole time and you're really not worried about it at home on Saturday. There was still some runs in that game by the Hoyas, and you had to respond with a blow of your own. So this team is built for March. And the other point I'll make is how many times in recent March Madness history have we seen a team win with like 65 points? Very rarely. You always see 75, 85, even getting into the 90s to get a win. This team is absolutely comfortable in that region. And I think that will do them very well come March and in the big dance.
Well, I think about the good thing about that, Zach, is it's not like, oh, we know they can win close games. They're doing it consistently.
Yeah.
And there's obviously positives and negatives to that. I mean, there's negatives come when you're playing teams that are worse than you, which will probably be the first two rounds we play in the NCAA tournament. We'll get teams seeded lower than us, and it's going to be closer than you would expect.
Yeah.
But that's just how the team plays when you don't play defense like that. But obviously the upside is you can just outshoot teams, outscore teams. I know Sean Miller said in his press conference, if anybody watched his press conference against Georgetown, you would have thought we lost with how upset he was with the team's defense. But he said the days of outscoring teams are over. But I don't really see why. I don't see why that's true. I mean, we have shown we can do it consistently. I think if we just get a little better defensively and can reduce average points against us by 4 or 5 points, that's just a couple of extra possessions of Colby Jones and everybody locking up defensively and just give it full effort. Because once again, we've seen that when we need to get stops, we've gotten them.
Yeah.
I mean, Indiana, you look at our losses. Indiana was a game where down the stretch, I know it was tied like 8 minutes left, but down the stretch, we were down for the last 4 minutes, pretty much. You look at Duke, it was the same way. Gonzaga was the only one where it was just like, but I mean, we couldn't really do anything against Strother. That was one of Strother's best games, and Gonzaga needed a lot to beat Xavier. And DePaul too was just an offensive rebound. I mean, so I think the defense is capable of just reducing the average points against by 4 or 5 points and just keeping the offense consistent.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that's all there is to be said about this team. They've got a gauntlet coming up at a couple spots in the Big East. And then you haven't seen Providence yet, but that feels like a game that you get them at home, you lock up a big seed in the Big East tournament and get it ready for March. But now we're going to turn our focus. That was a great Xavier talk. That was a lot of fun, I can tell, on me and Matt's end. You are an Indiana student currently. You broadcast for Indiana. What are you feeling about this team? Just unload here. Tell us what you think. This was a team that we were praising in our first couple episodes as really a national title contender. There has since been a slowdown in production. There's been some injuries. What do you think about Indiana? Where do you see them right now?
It's tough with the injuries. Xavier Johnson and Race Thompson, obviously. Well, Race Thompson was supposed to be out until February, but he actually played 5 or so minutes on yesterday against Michigan State. And Xavier Johnson won't be back till sometime in February if Indiana's lucky. I think it just took them a while to figure out how to play with those guys. I have faith in Mike Woodson. I think he's a really good coach. And we saw how good Indiana can be. I mean, you look at that Indiana Xavier game, and Xavier's gotten a lot better since that game. But Xavier still looked pretty good in that game. And Indiana, just with Trace Davis, Xavier Johnson, and Malik Renew, sometimes that's all they need. You know, they're a little more like the Xavier team where they have a really good offense. Sometimes their defense can struggle, and that stems from one of the best players in the country, in my opinion. And Trace Jackson Davis is definitely one of the best scorers in the country in the post. And but defensively is where he struggles a little bit. And if you've seen the past few Indiana games against other Big Ten opponents, they've just let the other big men get theirs against them. So right now, though, they've started to get it together, got that Michigan State win. It's just hard to figure out with the Big Ten because the Big Ten is so hard to figure out. I mean, you look at the rankings right now, there's only one Big Ten team in the AP rankings that came out today, and that's Purdue at 1. But the flip side is, other than Minnesota, there aren't really any cupcakes to say. And even Minnesota got that big win against Ohio State. A lot of teams in the Big Ten are very capable. They just haven't reached that next level. And it's very even, I feel like, between 2 and 13 right now in the Big Ten. But Indiana right now, in my opinion, is looking towards the top of that 2 to 13 that we're talking about. And I think they'll give Purdue a good shot in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, you mentioned the injuries of Trace Jackson Davis and Xavier Johnson. Wondering, besides those two players, who do you think's the most impactful team for Indiana right now, considering those two are hurt?
Jalen Hood-Schifino has done a good job of stepping into Xavier Johnson's role. So I'll say Race Thompson right now. And that's not to say Race Thompson's better than Xavier Johnson, but I think Indiana has better guys behind Xavier Johnson than they do behind Race Thompson. Jordan Geronimo has been the one that had to step up in place of Race Thompson in that starting 4 role. And starting to figure it out a little bit, but offensively, he's just had his struggles. And then Race Thompson just draws so much from Trace Jackson Davis because Thompson's so capable offensively. That's another aspect too. Is it's no secret that Trace Jackson Davis is better when Race Thompson's on the floor. So I'll say Race Thompson.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is a team that when I watched, I got to watch a lot of their non-conference games. They are a team that feeds so well off each other. I don't think there's a group that, when you take one of them out of the lineup, struggles as much as this team does. But when they are together and they're playing in sync, when you mentioned some of the guys, Hood-Schifino, Malik Renew, you get into the other guys off the bench, even Miller Kopp in some situations, they just play so well together. But the injuries have just messed up that chemistry right now. But I will say they are trending back up to where I think they started the season. This is a team that right now, as it stands, they're 4-4 in the conference. Like you mentioned, the only other team in the conference that's ranked is Purdue, and they're 8-1. They obviously lost that game to Rutgers. This feels like a team that could find itself as a 1 seed, 2 seed going into the Big Ten tournament, does it not?
Yeah, I think those first 4 losses are going to be hard to overcome in a sense, just because every game in Big Ten is tough. And, it's very possible that Purdue comes into Assembly Hall in a couple of Saturdays and Indiana gets the upset. But that's still just game before, game after. At Maryland is the game right before. Before that, you go into hosting Ohio State on Saturday, and even going to Minnesota. I mean, look at what they did to Ohio State. It's just so hard to be consistent in the Big Ten. That's why it's hard to overcome those 4 losses. Not to say that I don't think they could be the first or second best team in the Big Ten, eye test wise, by the time the season's over. But you have to be really, really good to stay consistent and only lose 1 or 2 more games for the rest of the Big Ten season.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Obviously, we asked this earlier with Xavier. It's a very ambiguous question, but what do you think is the ceiling for this team? Should they get healthy, and should they start getting back to where they were projected earlier in the season?
Ceiling, I'll say the same as Xavier. I'll say it's probably the Final 4. Once again, the defensive metrics for Indiana, you look at the defensive metrics of teams that have won a national championship in the past, and Indiana just isn't quite good enough. But it's serviceable, more serviceable than Xavier's is. And if you get the offense going with individual players like Trace Jackson Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino, it's another team that can really make a run just because of how hot they can be. I mean, coming into the year, what everyone expected the biggest weak spot to be is 3-point percentage. They're 19th in the country in 3-point percentage right now. So it's a team that's capable of making a run and capable of getting hot because it is a very streaky team. So ceiling, I'll say Final Four. But like Xavier, I think they're another team that's susceptible to an early round upset.
Yeah, I completely have to just say ditto to that. I think it's really going to be a matter of how things go down the stretch, and that's one of the frustrating things about basketball is it's not like football that you can just point to. Oh, Georgia's going to win it again. They might have a little struggle with this team, that team, but it's going to end up being them. It's just so hard to tell. We got a couple more minutes, Ben. We do this to all of our guests. Once again, it's one of the toughest questions in sports. Give us a right now Final Four prediction about halfway through the season, actually a little bit over. Who do you think is going to be going to the Final Four in the big dance this year?
So when you asked me to be on this podcast, I was preparing for this question because I know it comes up a lot, and I was thinking back to another radio show I was on before the first game of college basketball this year, and I'm gonna go back to my Final Four prediction from then, which I think is just funny to do. And I had Kentucky in it. Not going to have Kentucky in my current Final Four, although they're another team that I think could go on a run because they're not going to be a very high seed. We've seen Kentucky teams do it in years past, just to where they haven't figured out in the regular season, but they still have the talent level, and if all they need is to come together in March, so they are capable of making Final Four. But I don't think it's a very safe pick right now. I had Texas, who very good talent, just going through a lot right now, and the Big 12 is so tough. You lose your coach, and everything that happened is very hard. I had Houston. I'm going to keep Houston because I think they're just steady. Their defense is so good, and that's how they win games. I mean, you talk about how it's hard to win games in March Madness with 65 points, but I feel like there's a team every year that does that. And I think Houston is that team, just with the defense they've played. And I don't even want to say my fourth pick. I had to pick an upset pick, and I said Michigan. So I'm not going to be saying Michigan in my Final Four pick either right now. So you have to pick three other teams. I like Kansas State. It's so hard not to talk about Kansas State right now. Jerome Tang's done a really good job. Jerome Tang has had college basketball success as an assistant coach under Scott Drew at Baylor. You know what he's going to do, and he is so passionate about this Wildcat squad. So I'm going to go with Kansas State. It's tough. I'm going to go with the Virginia Cavaliers once again because they're a different Virginia team than recent years. It's not all about defense for Virginia, and Kihei Clark's got to be tired of losing by now, right? The last couple of years have not gone the way he's wanted, and obviously you had their run. He was part of their run, I think 4 years ago. He's a fifth-year senior now, but I think that leadership is going to be something that's invaluable. And coming into this, I hadn't picked my fourth team because I want to do the same thing where I pick kind of an upset pick, kind of someone who I think is going to be a 6 seed or lower. This team's not quite a 6 seed. Xavier fans may hurt to hear this, but I'll say Marquette Golden Eagles. I think they could go on a run very similar to one that Shaka Smart had earlier in his coaching career when he was at VCU. They're just so good offensively. And you look at that game that they played against Xavier, that's honestly one of Xavier's best defensive games, but they weren't necessarily making the shots that they usually make. And whether you credit Xavier's defense or just a little bit of an off night for Marquette, it was all Tyler Kolek in that game. Well, if Xavier fans haven't watched anything other than that game, I can promise you they have much more than Tyler Kolek. And I think that can show in March.
Yeah. No, I love all those picks. I think Houston's another team that I've kind of penciled in, and I think people are starting to get to the point where they're almost inking in Houston just because of how they've performed. But I don't hate those picks. I like the fact that you're mixing in some of the madness of March. Obviously, we've seen runs like that before. Marquette, although as a Xavier fan, it's tough to stomach, they're a team that's also built for March, and I think it's going to be a very exciting tournament this year. Matt, you got anything else for Ben before we send this one home?
No, I'm just going to say what you said. I love that Marquette pick. The only thing, I can see Marquette making a run, but there's just something about the Big East and March Madness that do not blend.
Yeah.
Besides Villanova, obviously.
Yeah. It's tough. The Big East is one of those conferences where it always feels so two-sided between the top and the bottom. I mean, especially this year, you look at the top teams, Xavier, Marquette, 4 teams ranked right now, UConn and Providence to go along with them. But the bottom, it's very different from the Big Ten, where I talk about Big Ten teams are battle tested day in, day out. They're also another conference that doesn't have a very good track record when it comes to March. I mean, you look at Big 12 and ACC are 2 conferences that do, but I think the Big East is just a little different this year. Everyone thought it would be a down year, but one thing I love about the Big East this year, and this will be my last note, the coaching in the Big East this year, it's just different. I mean, you bring in Sean Miller, Thad Matta, who hasn't really done a great job with Butler yet, but obviously you got to give him a lot of time. I mean, what Sean Miller's done with Xavier is kind of, you can't ask for it. I mean, it's very unprecedented. It's very difficult. And I think Shaka Smart's done a great job with Marquette. How much does Dan Hurley have to do with UConn's success? That's a question mark. I don't know if I'm all the way in on the Dan Hurley train, but you can't argue with the success they've had. And there's obviously the mainstay of Ed Cooley. I just think the coaching in the Big East is just different. Even without Jay Wright, I think it got a little better this year with a few additions.
Yeah. Ben, this has been awesome. We're definitely going to have you back on with March. We'll reassess the Final Four. We're probably going to spit out a bunch of episodes during that. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. Ben, thanks for coming on. We'll have to do this again soon.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's a lot of fun.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys, that was Ben Haller. Great interview for the pod. It was fun to have another guest on. Ever since we had OT on, we've been kind of looking for someone again. But guys, we got anything before we wrap it up?
Today.
I was going to say, we need one. Let's go back to the bowl.
They got to play out, Zach.
Yeah. AFC goes through Cincinnati. Unfortunately, it's in Kansas City, but it should have gone.
Fortunately, it's in Burrowhead.
Yeah.
Yep. So, all right, guys, thanks for watching Finding Nylon episode 8. We're on now. Headed towards March. Thanks for listening on YouTube and Spotify. We'll see you guys next time.